Hi, I'm Matt and welcome to Tech Tested. Today, we're going to try to set a world record. Now, this may not be the world record you're thinking of. Today, we are going to be submitting our first hardware bot score, and this will be setting the record for CPU frequency on a specific CPU. Now, that CPU in question is actually an APU. It's the A6-3500. Now, I know that's a really old processor, but there are a few things that make it quite unique. First, it's the last triple-core CPU AMD ever released. Back in the Athlon 2 and Phenom 2 days, AMD made triple-core CPUs to try to bridge the gap between the dual-core and the quad-core, dual-core being the low end of the CPU market and the quad-core being the high end. Now, when AMD launched the FM1 platform, they released what they called APUs, or Accelerated Processor Units. Essentially, it's just a CPU and GPU on a single die. Now, Intel has been doing this for a long time without calling their CPUs APUs, but the graphics AMD introduced to these CPUs was actually much stronger than what Intel had to offer, therefore they felt it justified a new name. Unfortunately, this particular APU didn't perform all that well. Still, it does serve a purpose for us in setting a record. Now, I actually stumbled across this CPU and motherboard. I bought a case off of somebody on Facebook Marketplace, and they had this motherboard and CPU in the case, and they just gave it to me because they said they didn't work. Lo and behold, after a little bit of tinkering, I got them to boot up. Another thing that makes this CPU quite unique is my ability to overclock it. Now, I don't know if this is due to the motherboard or the CPU, but by all available evidence, this CPU should be locked, meaning you can't overclock it using the multiplier. However, in my BIOS, I was able to up the multiplier all the way to 47. I really don't know why this was possible, and on an unlocked CPU, you would think it would be able to go beyond 47. Unfortunately, that's where it was capped. Still, when the CPU's base frequency is 2.1 GHz and its boost frequency is 2.4, 4.7 GHz is not too shabby. After that, I was able to overclock the base frequency to 106. Now, if you're involved in our channel, our Discord community, and our Twitch community, you may have actually seen me do the overclock on this CPU. I also have a screenshot of the CPU-Z submitted to our Discord. We have a special place dedicated in our Discord for overclocked CPUs and their screenshots, so if you're into overclocking, you can join our community and submit your scores there. But back to the CPU. After all of my overclocking was done, I got it to 4.98 GHz. I tried getting it to 5 GHz, but it would not push past that 106 base frequency. It would crash. Still, I have technically set the record for this CPU according to HardwareBot. Now, if you're not familiar with HardwareBot, it's a website where people can submit their overclocks to set records for specific hardware. It's also basically the industry standard, so if you want to know where a world record is, you usually go to this website. Now, here we're looking at the A6-3500 record page, and if you scroll down, you can see all of the submitted benchmarks and overclocks. Here you have Cinebench R15, R11.5, and 2003. Now, for some weird reason, my CPU did absolutely horrible in Cinebench despite being at 5 GHz. That's not what I'm worried about though. If we go down here to CPU frequency and click on the record, we can see that the CPU frequency world record as of right now is 4127 megahertz or 4.127 gigahertz. Now, if we minimize this and we go back to this screen, you can see right here that I am at 4.982 gigahertz. All we have left to do is to submit this score to HardwareBot to set the record. Now, there are a couple things you need to know before submitting to HardwareBot. There are rules you have to follow to get a valid submission. If you don't follow these rules, then it's not going to count. So in order to find the rules for the benchmark you're trying to set, go to Benchmarks, and for us, we're going to go to Processors. And then for CPU frequency, we're going to scroll down to CPU frequency. And here we're going to go over to Rules. Now, here are the rules. You have to submit a CPU-Z validation, and here they state you have to be running version 1.94 or higher. Now, let's go to our CPU-Z to see what version we are running, and we are running 1.961, which is higher than 1.94, so we're good there. Next, there is no limit on the Windows operating system you can use. So in theory, you could use anything from Windows 98 all the way up to Windows 10, or I guess even 11 in theory. Next, it says verification required. CPU-Z validation verification link registered on your HardwareBot username checked by CPU-Z. There is no screenshot required. However, I did take a screenshot that I will submit. Verification link is CPU-Z validation link. Changelog restrictions, I'm not even sure what that means, but regardless, we're going to try to go ahead and submit. Now, over here, we have our CPU-Z validation link. So that's what we're going to be using. So I've never done this before, but I've copied the link and we are going to go to my profile and then we are going to hit submit score. This is my first time. If I'm doing it very slow, just understand that's what's going on. Scroll down, we want to get to CPU frequency. So we'll go here and submit. All right, we've made our first submission to HardwareBot. So here it is. We have our CPU-Z validation of 4.982 gigahertz. Now this CPU is definitely not awesome, but we did just set a record. So to verify we've set the world record for this particular CPU, we are going to go into a different web browser where I'm not logged in and see if it shows up there. And here we are. There it is. Look right there. CPU frequency 4.982 gigahertz, submitted by none other than Tech Tested. I'm actually really proud of that. And as you can see here, we have a first place ranking, which is super cool. So just to show you guys how easy it is to actually set some records, just check this out. This is an Athlon 2X4640. I featured an entire video on this CPU, but needless to say, it's not that uncommon of a CPU. Now, this is the Zosma variant and not the Propus. However, you can still get your hands on them. In fact, I have 4. So if we go down here and look, there are no submissions for R15 with Benchmate, R20, or R20 with Benchmate. And this is a really common CPU. You could literally submit a stock setting score and you would now be the first place winner in that submission. So setting a HardwareBot record is definitely not difficult at all. You can do it, I can do it. It doesn't take expensive hardware. In fact, some of the more old and obscure hardware is going to be easier to set records on. Here's another example, an Athlon 2X4635. I have one of these, it overclocks absolutely terribly, but I could actually set a world record with it because there's nothing submitted for R15 with Benchmate or R20 with Benchmate. These are very simple benchmarks to run and you could do it, I can do it. We could set all kinds of records. I can set a world record, you can set a world record. Chances of you setting a record in overall performance is very low, but setting records for a specific CPU is definitely achievable. Now, I was going to go through the whole overclocking setup, but when I plugged this system back in, it had saved all of my BIOS settings for the 4.9 gigahertz, and I was worried I would actually ruin my overclock if I tried to do it again. But if you enjoy overclocking, we do weekly live streams, and you can check that out, and you can submit your own scores to our Discord or HardwareBot, and just gain some points and have a good time. Also, if you like overclocking just like I do, check out our website and pick yourself up one of these Just Add Voltage mugs. This is something our community kind of put together. I made the logo, our editor kind of did the fine tuning, but pretty much everyone in our community gave their input on the logo. It was really cool to see everyone come together and make this design, and you can pick it up at our website. There's also other merchandise there that you can pick up to support the channel, and we would greatly appreciate it. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, follow us on our social media platforms, check out our Discord and our website, and just keep overclocking.